Welcome to the show. This is Action Network's basketball betting podcast presented by FanDuel, and I'm your host, Maria Marino, joined by Action Network writer Brian Fonseca for the first time on this podcast. Brian, thank you for being with us.
Absolutely. Anytime. Thank you for having me.
Tell us just a little bit about yourself and sort of your background betting and or on the W.
My first W experience was actually not betting at all. I had season credentials to cover them in 2017. So this is like right out of college. And covering the Liberty specifically because
Love
I'm in New
it.
York. And that was a really good Liberty team. Went to the playoffs. They were contenders during that run. This was like peak Tina Charles.
Yes.
I think Bria Hartley had just came back from having a baby. And Shavante Zealous, Sugar Rogers was an all-star that year. Like that was a very fun team, Epiphany Prince. And then as betting sort of got into the forefront, started betting on it a little bit more probably a couple years later and during the pandemic, and now here at Action, right, props, WNBA props a couple times a week, and we'll get into the games tonight.
Perfect. And you actually have an article dropping today on this 4-game slate and your best props for the evening. So definitely check that out over at Action Network. And real quick, before we just run through the games here, I just love that you brought up, sort of the Liberty, that period. That
Yeah,
was like the final days at Madison Square Garden.
yeah.
Obviously, Tina Charles is like one of the greats who's I think a little bit underrated as far as like W history. And then there was a period where the Madison Square Garden company like had the Liberty playing at Westchester County Center, it was called, which was like a very strange move. And I think it honestly hurt the franchise for a time until the Brooklyn Nets ownership actually bought the Libs. Now they're in Brooklyn, and now it's like this whole new era for the Liberty. But I digress. Let's get into this slate. Like I said, it's Tuesday, August 22nd. Hard to believe. Playoffs are around the corner. And the first game, we'll talk about the Aces visiting the Dream at 7 Eastern on CBS Sportsnet. This is a big spread. This
Yeah.
is Aces minus 15 and a half. And I think even though we both expect the Aces to win coming off a rare loss, this is just a spread that does not look attractive.
Especially when you consider that the Aces are, I think this is right, 19-13 against the spread this year, despite being 28-4.
And
Um,
I think that's a product too, Brian, of them
yeah,
because they've been so good. They've been hanging these really big spreads a lot. So it's a little bit misleading in terms of how dominant they've been, although I feel like their margin of victory has been not as great lately. And I should mention, so they've lost 2 of their last 4 first home losses of the season, which is a little surprising. And I did look this up. They are 3-1 ATS after a loss. The one game they didn't cover was missed by half a point. Please continue.
and they're still missing Candace Parker, which I mean, starting to become more aware of her absence, given that she's been out for a lengthy period of time to this point. And hopefully she's back in time for the playoffs because we want to see everyone at full strength for that potential WNBA finals between them and the Liberty, assuming they're the two that end up getting there. Now, I still like the Aces in this game. I don't know if I like them to cover 15.5 because that's so steep. I like they should win by 20.
Mhm.
And what I have trouble betting on them, even prop wise, because it's like, okay, if it's not Asia Wilson, because Asia Wilson, I could sort of wrap my head around her production
Mhm.
for the most part this season. Then is it going to be Kelsey Plum tonight? Is it going to be Jackie Young, or is it going to be Chelsea Gray? Is it going to be Chelsea Gray points? Is it going to be Chelsea Gray assists? Is it going to be Kelsey Plum points, or is it going to be threes? And you find yourself playing that game on a night in, night out basis with this team. And then I'll just be like, all right, screw it. Asia Wilson points over or
Okay.
rebounds over, right? Prop wise. But in terms of the game itself, before getting to that, the game itself, I like the Aces in the first half at least. I think I did see it at 8.5 before I went to bed last night. Um, Somewhere along those lines, I'm okay with that bet. I like them more in the first half than I do for the game. I feel like they're going to get off to a strong start. They typically respond well after losses. Asia
Mhm.
Wilson does as well. But my favorite bet probably on this game is on FanDuel. Aces win and the over. So a little bit of a parlay there, but Aces win and the over 168.5 is where I would lean. And then with Asia Wilson specifically on the prop side, I'm looking at points because I mean this is I write about this because there's a little game I play in the previews called Trap or Trend because
Mhm.
the W's been weird to bet on this year, and you have these instances. This happens with Asia Wilson a lot, in particular, where she has 5 straight games of 21 plus points, and her point total over under is at 20.5. And it's
Mhm.
like, yeah, I kind of want to take the over, but what if this is the one instance where it's under? I feel
Right.
good about the over on that today. I would just hope that we don't get garbage time too early, and then she's sitting there with like 15 points on 10 shots, and it's like, here's the quick hook, and it's over.
Mhm.
But that's sort of how I'm leaning. Aces win plus the over, and that's plus odds, and Asia Wilson over 20.5 points. I
Okay.
like that as well.
I love it. I'm glad you brought up how the aces can sometimes be difficult with props because it could be somebody different every night. The Liberty are the same way. I think in their last 4 games, they had 4 different
So
scoring
true.
leaders per game. So, I mean, it's a good thing for contending for a championship to have some depth and to have, different people that can get it done every night. But for the prop market, it can be, a little bit tricky. But sounds good. Riding with the aces on the money line. I think that is I think that makes sense more so like you said than sure. Do I think they're going to win by 16? Probably, but it's just a little bit too high of a number to be like super comfortable. All right. We got 3 more games we're going to touch on. One of them is the Sun visiting the Mystics, 7 Eastern on NBA TV. I believe on FanDuel, the Sun are favored by 6.5. Nope, it's down to 5.5, which I saw it initially at 7.5. So
Me too. Yeah,
so I,
that's
I find that
surprising.
interesting. And maybe it's just because of the narrative, because the Sun have kind of stumbled a bit lately. They lost 3 straight before beating Chicago. Meanwhile, the Mystics are starting to get some of their people back. Shakira Austin is probable for today. Ariel Atkins has been back. Deladon is questionable. She came back for a game, then missed the following game, so I'm not sure about that. But maybe it's just like the narrative of like, okay, they're kind of getting some people back that maybe maybe betters are going on the Mystics side. I'm not sure, but I don't trust that Mystics team right now. It's not, I've said this all season. It's not anything against them. They fight, they compete, they're feisty, they're well coached, it seems like, but they've just it had so much inconsistency with their personnel.
Yeah, and I think when I looked at the change, because I feel like it opened at 7.5, as we mentioned. At least that's what I saw last night. And to
Yes.
see it go to 5.5, I was like, okay, is Elena Deladon playing?
Right.
Is that what's going on? That's the first thing I looked up, and still we don't have like an official ruling
Right.
on that, and we probably won't until, of course, after this gets posted, because
Yes.
that's how these things go.
Yes.
I,
Check
I
those
still
injury reports.
yeah, yeah, definitely. Keep your eyes on that. I still like the Sun either way. I It's funny because like probably 2 weeks ago, I was flirting with the idea of, could the Sun potentially spoil a Liberty Aces final? Like, could they be the team?
Definitely. I
Because
definitely have wondered that.
yeah, because if you're looking at what a team can do, they
Yes.
can get to such a high level defensively, and I don't care what league it is in basketball. If you can get to that high of a level defensively, you compete with anybody.
Yes.
And there are no 7 game series in the WNBA. So you can kind of surprise somebody with multiple victories or whatever the case may be,
It's a great point.
and it's like, I've thought about this particularly, we don't really know what the timetable is for Candace Parker. We've heard some things, but we don't know
Right. Not
essentially,
official.
right? Yeah. So the way Alyssa Thomas has been playing, I'll get to her more in a second, but I've thought about that, and then they had this recent slippage to where it's like, okay, like they've come back down to earth, but I'm not off them yet. I still like the Sun very much, and with that, I do think that they're gonna win tonight.
I've been thinking that for a while with the Sun. They've been underrated. They have the motivation, and Matt Moore always talks about this on Buckets when we talk NBA. Like motivation factor is really really key in betting
Underrated.
on hoops, and
Hmm.
they have the experience. I mean, this team has been to the finals many times. They've had many deep playoff runs. They're extremely salty, I'm sure, after losing last year and the way that they lost. Um, I think coming into the season, they were just kind of forgotten about because Jonquel Jones left. They changed coaches. And, you hear the term revenge game. I've been saying this is a revenge season for the Sun. Like, this is revenge
Hmm.
season. Um, like I said, they have lost a couple of games recently. They dropped a game to the Mercury though when Dewana Bonner like tweaked her back. She seems to be fine. She's been playing the last few games.
Yeah,
I may have put in a little long shot Alyssa Thomas MVP bet, which it's really not like the odds tell you it's a long shot, but she is, I would say, a top three MVP
agreed.
candidate for sure. And after she had that like crazy triple double like a couple weeks ago, I was like, let me just for the heck of it. I don't think she's gonna actually win just because I think Stewie, the narrative has been leaning her direction. But that being said, don't sleep on the Sun.
Agree. No, and like awards are narrative awards at the end of the day. These things are
Yes.
voted on. Like people are gonna vote on them, and I don't think. And I would love to see it, right? Because Alyssa Top, she's putting up ridiculous numbers, and she's been
Yeah.
so impactful. Um, and I think with the Sun, if they can put together one more really good stretch before the end of the season, she can get some of that back in her favor. But
Yeah.
I do think that it's going to be hard this year not to pick anyone from the Aces of Liberty, and particularly Brianna Stewart
Yeah.
because of the narrative on her side, and I don't think they're going to give it to Asia Wilson again. So I think
Right.
that's
And
kind of what I'm looking
I
at.
I agree. The only thing I was thinking was, Alyssa Thomas does what she does with a roster that isn't quite as stacked
Agreed.
as those other two. But then when Stewie got that like third 40-point game, which has never happened in a season, I was like, oh, okay, well,
There it
here
is.
we go. But that being said, what do you like for Alyssa Thomas tonight?
Assists. I
Okay.
like her assists. I mean, you could like anything Alyssa Thomas does because she's
Yes.
across the board just producing at a high level. Assists, minus 120 to go over 7.5. I think generally her assists have been in that 7.5 range. Because she keeps getting 8, 7, and she's had other games where it's 10, 11, 12. And, I think I saw it set once or twice at 8.5. That's a little high, but in previous games, but I think 7.5 is right. I think this is the perfect spot for it. She's gotten to 8 assists or more in 5 of her last 7 games. Um, Side note, she has an
Mhm.
on off of 29.5 per 100 possessions this season.
Wow.
To your point about how she's been impacting that roster that
Yes.
obviously isn't as talented as the Aces or Liberty. Like she's been so good this year.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that she's gonna get this assist prop. She hasn't gotten it against the Mystics,
Mhm.
which is really interesting. Um, in any of the 3 times that these teams played each other, but
Hmm.
2 of the first times they played each other were the second and third game of the season. She hadn't
Right.
become like this version of Alyssa Thomas where she's doing everything. At least at this point in the year. And then the most recent one, she just happened to have 6, but she's had a bunch of games since where it's like 8 and over, 8 and over, 8 and over. So I'm
Yeah,
gonna I'm gonna I'm gonna look at the Alyssa Thomas assist over for tonight.
I like it. The chemistry is at a different level than it was at the start of the season. Also, not that I don't think this really affects your prop either way, but if Deladon does play, I could see AT dishing more because
Mm,
you have a bigger, bigger paint presence defensively. Now, I didn't see EDD in the one game back that she played in, and she's clearly not 100%. I don't know how well she's really moving, but I think I think the Sun recognized that, this is go time. This is the stretch of the season where they need to kind of secure themselves, and haven't dropped a few games recently. I could see them, winning this pretty handily. And if that's going to happen, AT is going to be right in the mix, playmaking. So
Yeah.
we got two more games on tonight. We're just going to touch on fairly briefly. So we got the Storm visiting the Sky. Sky are favored by 2.5. This is at 8 o'clock Eastern. Interestingly, the Storm are 6-3 straight up in their last 9. Jewel Lloyd still leads the league in scoring, 24 points per game. And I actually wondered about this line, and let me just make sure it's still the same on FanDuel. Yes. You know, the Sky are only favored because they're at home. It's 2.5. Should they even be favored? Like, they've lost 5 in a row. They looked like they were showing life for a bit. Like, they beat the Wings a couple times, and then now it seems like they're just plummeting.
On the other side of that, though, it's like, could you really make the Storm a favorite on the road?
Good question.
Like,
you're right. So that's fair.
That's why I found this game so tough to bet on, because it's like,
this is tough.
This is the toughest one tonight for me, because it's just from the standpoint of, like, I mean, all right, the Sky shouldn't be favorites. Neither should the Storm, but somebody has to be favorites. And then I find myself asking, is this a Kalia Copper spot?
Yes.
Or is this a Jewel Lloyd spot? Or both, potentially?
Because, Jewel, is she from Chicago? Did I make that up?
Let me see. No, I think she's from Philly.
I remember hearing that she, like, her favorite restaurant ever is in Chicago, and, like, she always, like, goes off in Chicago. I remember seeing that narrative, like, earlier in the season.
Oh, she's from Illinois. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, she went to Notre Dame. I knew that.
Yeah.
So anyway, take that for what you will.
And yeah, I said Philly because Kalia Copper's from Philly. I just did the math in my head.
It's okay.
Yeah. So anyway, Jewel Lloyd. First of all, I like her points over, because FanDuel is only setting it at 22.5.
Oh.
Now, she hasn't been as explosive scoring lately. Mm-hmm. She did have a 31-point outing, to be fair, in her last showing, but her last 4 30-plus point outings have all come on like 40% shooting or less. So it's not, wildly efficient, just volume shooting, but we don't care about that if we're looking at point props, point totals, right?
Yeah, you just want the attempts. You just want to know that she's going to take those shots, and she has the, authority to do that. And, it makes sense her efficiency might not be the best, because there isn't a lot around her.
Who's she passing the ball to?
Yeah, like, she literally, like, her usage is probably insane.
Yeah.
They've been playing a little better lately. Like, they might be clicking a little more lately, but kind of like too little too late for this season.
Yeah. And so Jewel Lloyd over 22.5 on FanDuel. If it's going to stay there, I might as well take it. Like, it was minus 142 last night. And I was like, that's still fine. Like, I'm not somebody who, it's minus 170. I'm not going to play it now. Like, if I think it's going to happen, then, I might as well do it.
Exactly.
But it's minus 142, so that's not bad. And if it goes up to 23.5, where some other books have it, I think I saw it in one place at 24.5. But if it goes up to 23.5, I still might take it. I think I wouldn't call the Chicago Sky defensive stoppers in this post Candace Parker era, where they're not competing for a title right now.
Yes.
So I think this game could potentially be a lot of fun. Also,
Mm-hmm.
I just think it could be chaotic, just volume shooting everywhere. And hopefully we get a Jewel Lloyd Kalia Copper showdown. I don't love either team from a winning standpoint.
Yes.
I think there's logic where you can go with the home favorite, and for the Sky to sort of snap their skid, and then there's some logic to go with, like, hey, the Sky aren't playing that well, and then the Storm, they can get one on the road because Jewel Lloyd is that good, and if she has an efficient 30-point performance, and you could talk yourself into that, it's probably a stay away from me, and I'll probably just stick to the point prop.
Fair enough. All right, one more game before we head out. It's the Wings visiting the Lynx, 8 p.m. Eastern. On Twitter, Wings are favored by 6.5. They have won 3 straight, including 2 over the Sun, which is very interesting. They've been a very compelling team uh, throughout much of this season. I think they're still a little inconsistent for my liking, but they're a team that I think can shock some other teams. Like if they get hot, I think they could, knock off some of the top teams like on any given night, which they have done and they have shown. And oddly, I read this that the Lynx are the only current playoff team with a losing record at home. They're 6-10 straight up at Target Center. But this is another team where it's a very critical time. The Lynx, they're in a playoff spot right now, but they got to be careful. And they started playing a lot better, but they need to really, again, kind of like what I was saying before. I think I was talking about the Mystics maybe, but I was saying they just need to gut check and solidify themselves. But this is a game I'm probably staying away from.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's fair. But I will say this: I did find a prop that I like.
Ooh, good.
I love Kayla McBride. Okay,
Ooh.
she's one of my favorite wings in the league. Um, I just love her game and how she can sort of just score coming off screens and fly off screens, gets her a jumper. She's finally been in rhythm lately. Earlier in the year, when I placed a couple bets on her points and or 3-point overs, I would say hey, no, she's off to an inconsistent start. I think she's going to turn it around because earlier in the season, there were a lot of single digit performances and the volume was kind of not really totally there. And lately, she's been really elevating, and I think that's also helped this run that the Lynx are on. Right now, she's gotten to 13 and a half in terms of a point prop. That's something that she's gone over 7 of her last 9 games.
Mm.
18 last time, 21 before that. Slight unders 2 games before that, and then 5 straight. Or is my math correct? Yeah, 5 straight games going over 13 and a half there, including a 26-point outing at the Liberty, which, that was fun to watch on TV.
Yes.
But Kayla McBride over, I love the rhythm that she's in right now. I think this is a good spot for her. And she's still deadly off of pin down screens. She's one of the deadliest in the NBA, WNBA, at shooting from distance when she has it going. Though she hasn't been super efficient from 3 lately, the volume is getting there to the point where it's okay, so you can trust that points prop a little bit more. In terms of the actual game, do like the way the Lynx have been playing, but it might be another stay away from me.
Yeah, no, I think that's totally fair. Like I said, you have a Wings team that's definitely solid, and the
Yeah.
Lynx, they haven't really shown that they have much of an advantage at home. So that being said, I'm super happy that you sort of pointed us in the direction of a Kayla McBride prop because I agree. I think she has been a total difference maker. Like her play second half of the season compared to the first has been, super elevated. So super fun 4-game slate today. Brian Fonseca, I'm so glad you're able to join us on Buckets.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime. First time on the WNBA portion of buckets,
I
and
know.
second time on buckets total. But yeah, look,
Wow.
it's been a fun WNBA season to bet on. Also, a difficult one because things are just all over the place. But ultimately, definitely one of the more fun seasons, though.
I agree. It's
In
fun for
terms of
me.
talking
This is
about it.
my debut season
Mm.
covering WNBA here on Buckets, presented by FanDuel on the Action Network. Thank you so much for listening. Once again, I'm Maria Marino. We'll be back. And don't forget to download the award winning Action app. You can rate and review this podcast as well to try and win some Action swag or a free subscription to Action Pro. Let's get buckets.